There we go. There we go. Now we're tracking. So I was asked to spend some time this morning to talk through and kind of put into context this whole conceptualization of what we consider to be competency-based education. We talk about it as faculty. We hear the terminology thrown around. We kind of hear this concept of CAMI kind of being referenced in several different instances, and what Forrest was just talking about. But for the folks that are new preceptors in particular, and even for some of the individuals that may have been preceptors for a long time, I think it's important to understand why we even want to be considered as CAMI accredited, what value that brings to us, what value that brings to our students, and how, frankly, the Army-Baylor program has been able to kind of lead in this area for a fairly long time in the whole or larger CAMI community. So, very briefly, some of the things I'm going to talk about and try to keep us on schedule here this morning. I want to talk and kind of bring everything from the broader scope of why we talk about competency-based education and bring it down into a very narrow kind of tip of the spear sort of perspective of what Army-Baylor does and how we are actually accomplishing this phenomenon, if you will, of competency-based assessment. So we're going to talk about the drivers. We're going to talk about some of the other health competency or health management competency models to kind of give a frame of reference. We're going to talk about our particular competency model and the joint medical executive skills and how Army-Baylor has actually fabricated that into how we conduct business on a daily basis. And then probably most important to the preceptors in the audience, those that are here local as well as those that are going to view this at a distance, how we actually leverage this competency model into something that's meaningful and actionable both by the student as well as the preceptor, and what we really are asking the preceptors to do to help students develop their competencies as they go through the residency year. So from a broad brushstroke perspective, there's this organization called the Council for Higher Education Accreditation. Okay? And certainly I'm going to defer in some instances to Jesse Tucker that's in the room with us. I spent a lot of time with CAMI and has served on the CAMI board for a number of different years. But CHIA basically is the accreditor of accreditors. Okay? And a lot of direction with this whole conceptualization of competency-based education is really being drawn out of Department of Education as well. Department of Education, from a purely practical term, purely practical basis, is they've got all these great loan programs that you may have heard of, right? Student loans that are being offered across multiple different disciplines. Those loans are going out to students that are going out and getting degrees and then promptly finding themselves in the basement back at their parents' house. Okay? So from a purely practical standpoint, Department of Education is pushing very heavily to making sure when we actually offer a student a loan package, a loan program, it is for a degree program where they're going to come out with some sort of competency. And CHIA, therefore, has been one of the, lack of a better term, deemed accreditors of accreditors to say, okay, well, in a particular field, in a particular discipline, how are you making sure that there is going to be competent students coming out at the end of your program? Okay? So in turn, they accredit CAMI, which you've heard Dr. Kim talk about. CAMI is our accreditor. They come in, hopefully, every 7 years. Okay? And you heard him reference the fact that we just attained our CAMI accreditation. Okay? And they come through and look at all phases of our program. And what I mean all phases, I mean all phases. 35 separate criterion, multiple sub-criterion within each one, and they look at all aspects of our curriculum, what products are produced, what the faculty are doing, how the faculty are developed, how the students are developed. Very, very fine-toothed detail. And in current operating modalities, what we do, CAMI has a program called e-accreditation. E-accreditation, we basically have to submit all of our evidence up to CAMI so they have an opportunity to review, and then a review team actually comes through, wades through all of that material, and then comes on site and then visits with the students, visits with the alumni, visits with preceptors, and several of you that were local got to experience that quite recently. Several of us, and one of the strengths of Army-Baylor, quite honestly, is several of us have served as CAMI fellows. I've served as one. We've got Fred, Lynn Downs, Jason Richter is one, Forrest has served as one. So one of the reasons we do that, one, is to improve our own program and continually understand what the CAMI accreditation process looks like. Another reason we do that, quite honestly, is you heard kind of the voting methodology in U.S. News and World Report. Doesn't hurt us at all for other programs to see someone when they show up as a CAMI visitor. Oh, there's an Army-Baylor, faculty member there on the team. So it helps us in multiple dimensions, and it also, of course, helps us keep very much current on what CAMI is doing. Now, number of different competency models out there, okay? And I didn't list them all, actually. They're Public Health Leadership, the Health Leadership Alliance, the National Center for Healthcare Leadership. There's the SLU model that I actually couldn't find a graphic for. There's a couple other smaller ones. All of them have merit. All of them, are fairly consistent in what they're actually trying to tackle and what they feel a student in healthcare management should walk away with. But of course, we've adopted or really we're told to adopt, it was kind of voluntold, the Joint Medical Executive Skills Competency Model. Okay? Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, first iteration started about what year? Okay, so 1996 is when this model originally floated out on the stage. You just heard Army-Baylor faculty were heavily involved at its inception. And it's now on its actually 8th iteration. We are currently operating under the 7th because we haven't fully adopted and implemented all the way through all phases of the curriculum. But the unique aspect, of course, to the GEMC model is there is a significant military medical component that you won't find in the HLA or the SLU or any of the other models. So, of course, it makes sense. And as you unpack this, and you're going to see some of these materials, especially those that are sitting over on the oral boards tomorrow, each one of these 7 domains that you see around the circle can be unpacked in a number of different ways to very finite level of detail. So, of course, just kind of going around the circle, military medical makes the Joint Medical Executive Skills model unique. Leadership and organizational management you see almost universal across all of the models out there. Health law and policy, of course, has a unique dimension to it, or a few unique dimensions to it by virtue of the military medicine aspect of what we do. Health resources allocation, performance measurement and improvement, individual and organizational behavior, and ethics, all, of course, contribute to the model. And as you'll see very shortly, what we ask our students to do during the course of not only the didactic year, but in the residency as well, is spread their competency assessment, spread their competency, basically exposure to as broad a range of those competencies as we can get that student to get. So we've had the model, and in Truth in Lending, we had the model since 1996. Okay, you heard that. We really didn't start infusing competency-based education into the Army-Baylor program until about, okay, some did it in 98. We really didn't get it infused into the curriculum across the board until about 2005, 6, 7-ish, okay? And we're still learning. You heard Dr. Kim talk about how the program is still progressively improving. We're figuring out ways to better sequence the curriculum to get the right competency layering effect. You heard Bloom's taxonomy talking about the knowledge application expert. It's a constant work in progress. And to echo his sentiments about new faculty coming on board, it's very much the value-added process that Army-Baylor experiences. Because you have a new faculty member that comes in and they challenge the process. They're senior military officers. They're not just going to accept the status quo. So as this new blood comes on board, it's forcing us to revalidate our process continually. And it's very, very healthy for the Army-Baylor program. Okay? Doesn't mean we change everything all the time, but it forces us to truly examine what we do. So what you see on the screen here is a little bit dated, but what we basically have had to do is, over the past several years, is take this Joint Medical Executive Skills Competency Model and try to figure out a way to adopt it fully across all phases of the curriculum. Okay? Because we kind of operated in name only, okay? And frankly, CAMI, our accreditor, has gone from an era, if you will, of basically where programs were accredited, they were peer-reviewed, but it was not really consistent across the board, to an era now where, based on the guidance from DOE, CHIA, and others, where we actually have to fuse competencies into our curriculum, without question. You will have a hard time getting accredited anymore. Okay? Now, this probably wasn't true about 3, 4, 5 years ago. You will have a hard time getting accredited by CAMI anymore unless you are competency-based. And not just competency in name only. Several programs you walk into, they're still very much in the evolutionary process of how to figure this out. You actually have to show how you deliver competencies, assess competencies, and one of the big problems that many programs have is, how do I know that, when student X comes in versus student Y, they're going to come in with competencies already on board? How do I assess this student versus this student, this clinician versus this, MSc officer? How do I differentiate between the two? Should my curriculum adapt to the student, or should we just throw a blanket curriculum across everybody and assume you're good? Okay? So one of the great challenges that the entire field is experiencing is, how do I do that? How do I get down into the individual student evaluation and be able to assess this student versus that student versus that student, and make sure that when they walk out, it's not we're going to make them an expert, right? We've already said that, but how do I bump up those levels of competency across all domains, all dimensions, to the maximum extent we can get that student? Okay? There is no single right answer, okay? But one of the great challenges that we're experiencing in our field, okay? And as we go through as accreditors, and those that are CAMI fellows, can attest to this, and I'm sure Jesse can as well, serving where he serves with CAMI now. Very few programs have truly solved that particular aspect. Okay, we have. Okay, we're one of the few programs that has actually received a strength finding during an evaluation process for what's called 3C3, which is individual competency assessment. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you what we're doing is perfect. It's not. We're still continuing to evolve our process. But this tool that we're talking about, and some of you that have been preceptors, you hear this term, the bear, okay? And it's probably a bear sometimes to deal with, right? And so there's some, little innuendos there, but it actually represents this Baylor Experience and Assessment Review, okay? The idea is we give this to a student when they matriculate. It's their product, okay? All with the intent that they need to get what they came to get. Okay? And in that bear, and we're going to unpack it here very shortly and go over to Excel, but the idea is we want to, and this is actually the residency phase, but we want to look at where you are at baseline, objectively and subjectively. Where do you think you are versus where are you really? Okay, when you first come in the program, and that's somewhat an interesting, kind of mind-bending experience for some students that think they're Jesus and walk on water, and they find out they're really not. Or conversely, they think they don't know a whole lot, but come to find out they know a little bit more than they think they did. Okay, and then by class, all the way through that didactic year, okay, so that we, as on a faculty basis, on a quarterly basis, we can sit down with a student and have a good kind of point of departure to say, okay, you got an A in this class. As you look at the competency model, do you think you got everything that you need to get? Okay? And at least we can start to have that conversation on a competency basis. If you say, yeah, I got an A, but I don't really feel quite so strong, then we can have a conversation about where do I go to get you additional resources, where can I find additional material to give to you to help you plus up or take with you and a little bit of lifelong learning. We also have an end of didactic year assessment, joint medical executive skills, objective exam, and subjective assessment. And then that all, ideally in the, we're not quite there yet, but moving in that direction, what we'd like to be able to do is take that bear from the didactic year and hand it off to the preceptor and say, you know what, here's Captain Smith. Captain Smith looks really strong in these areas, both objectively, subjectively, but look here, he's pretty weak in analysis. He's pretty weak in finance. So what should happen then is those projects we select need to be focused in on Captain Smith's weaknesses. Plussing up those, leveraging his strengths, okay, or her strengths, but also hitting those weaknesses so that, we can plus up or find in them those opportunities where they can exercise that, that analytical muscle to the maximum extent possible. So this bear, and this is just kind of the graphical representation, I'll spend a minute here kind of walking through the entire product and where we're going with it. What we'd like out of the preceptors. First and foremost, we'd like you to ask the students, ask them for their bear. Okay? Challenge them. Make them use this product. Okay? And it's not necessarily that I'm retiring. Okay? You heard that? I don't really care whether they use it or not from a purely, taking care of Brad sort of perspective. I'm not getting any royalties for the use of the bear, nothing like. It's really a means for them or mechanism for them to keep things on track, okay? To make sure that they're getting the competencies that they need, that the program is saying that it's going to convey, and again becomes a conversation piece, hopefully in a positive manner as we start to make those assessments. And then, as I've kind of referenced before, assess the areas of strength, but select those projects, hopefully something that aligns within your organization that's helpful to you, conducive to your own operations, but is going to force that student to get involved, to interact, to make what they need to have happen to be able to leverage and really plus up where they need to plus up. We ask that each project and each rotation is evaluated on a maximum of 5 competencies. And we do that deliberately. Some students, when we first started this, they said they get into this project and we covered everything, okay? All 35 competencies. Pick, select, force them into a 5 competency maximum. And then what that does is it then forces them to prioritize and really look at, okay, what did I really work on the most? And whenever there's holes then the next project hopefully is not only hitting an additional set of competencies. It's not that they can overlap, but I'll pick on the finance guys or the 70 Charlies in the community. We have a tendency that we gravitate towards our strengths, which is a lot of cool finance analysis and nugging into the the eaches and everys for P&Ls and whatnot. That's a great set of competencies to have, but it certainly isn't the only set of competencies. So we need to spread those across. We want folks involved in policy. We want folks involved in law. We want folks involved in in quantitative analysis and whatever we can get them exposed to. And then we really, again, to echo Colonel Kim's comments, we really do seek your feedback as preceptors. What are the students not getting? Where are they short? Okay? And one of the things that we're going to, kind of the secondary or tertiary step to what we're doing is to start to consolidate this data. And I'm referencing back here to Dave. Dave has been collecting a lot of this data. So we can look at it from an individual student standpoint. What we want to be able to do is start to layer these student cohorts on top of one another from a data standpoint and start to focus on those areas of curriculum that really need to be plussed up. When we have consistent holes from student to student to student to student, what are we not doing? Okay? Who's not doing what they need to do from a faculty standpoint, or maybe we just haven't considered it as part of our curriculum. It's in the competency model. Okay? And again, that's part of our evolutionary process that's hopefully making us to get better. And the last one, diversify the experience, kind of goes without saying. If you're going to get a maximum amount of competency exposure, hopefully that will come automatically. So for those that haven't had the pleasure of dealing with the bear, I'm going to try to make it not so much of an eye chart here. This is, of course, several tabs to this bear, and I'm going to, forgive me for a little bit, I'm going to minimize it just so you can see the full breadth, and then I'll blow things back up. Again, for those that haven't seen it before, across the left-hand side are all of our competencies, all 35 of the Joint Medical Executive Skills, broken down by domain. So those are the bolds here. The pre-didactic, basically self-assessment and didactic assessment. This is our entire curriculum from start to finish. Okay? And this is, I want to stress too, this is the MHA curriculum. Okay? It's really the only one that we're evaluating through the bear lens. So all students will get this, okay, but we're only using this to leverage for the MHA curriculum. And then in each row here, so this is one class, you can tell how many different competencies that that particular instructor is saying that they're going to develop and at what level. So as we go quarter to quarter, as we jump across the entire curriculum, again, it becomes very much a living product, a living document that the students should be continuing to evolve and continuing to develop. And then post-didactic, a self-assessment and GEMC exam. We have the strategic management course that's evaluated at the domain level. And then we have our oral examination boards, again evaluated at the domain level. Will be happening tomorrow. And then back here we have the preceptor assessment and the resident assessment. Okay? And then the tabs that you're going to see, an opportunity for the student to be able to come in and, again, on an iterative basis, talk with the faculty member as we're going through the didactic year, what's strong, what's weak, what do they think they need, and it just becomes more of a record if nothing else. This is the residency tab. For those that, again, preceptors that haven't seen it, this year is broken out into two different sections. You have actual projects that are going to be put into the portfolio, as well as rotations. I'll blow this up a little bit. So across the top, again, by domain, all of the individual competencies that are expected. And then as you go down, basically the entire document, you can see the various sections here. The expectation, you're going to hear this a little bit later in the day, the expectation out of a student portfolio is, what's the current number, 4 to 8?
With 4 portfolio projects plus best practice.
Okay.
Total of 5 projects.
So you're going to require a total of 5. Maximum, though, is still 8, or is there a max?
4 and only 4.
Are you going to cap it at 4? Okay. So, again, evolutionary process. The idea then is these sections over here to the left for those portfolio projects, they actually have to go in, tell us what the project is, or tell you what the project is, and then assess which one of those competencies or which 5 competencies are being assessed in that particular project in their portfolio. Now, we know it's, the residency is very much more than just portfolio development. So in the major rotations that a student does, and the exposure that they get through just the experiential part of being in the residency location, we afford the opportunity to be able to do the same thing here, all with the intent that we go all the way down to the bottom. We want to be able to start to assess an average portfolio or an average competency for that student. Okay? So again, as this happens on a quarterly basis, as you sit down with your residents in the course of that sequence, there's now a mechanism where, from a somewhat of a mechanical basis, we can start to assess where those holes are. Last tab here gives you an opportunity, or the student the opportunity to, again, give us a little bit of the qualitative assessment, qualitative comments on the next tab back. You can leverage that as a tool, as a preceptor, just to be able to have the student kind of keep a running record of what's going on with the project, current updates, that sort of thing. And what we're trying to get to then is the ability to map competencies. And there's a couple different ways we do that. One, and there's a couple different preferences in the room as well. Okay, I like the polar map because there's a layering effect. I can see where, as we go through the phases of the program, over here to the right-hand side, from the pre-didactic all the way through up through the end of the residency, we can start to layer things a little bit. There's also the direction we're going is, and there's some that prefer it this way, where we can actually, again, go by competency at the bottom, competency area, and then the various actual assessments that are going back through time. The BEAR, again, is a living document, something that, we give to the students. We, very much tell the students this is your tool, your opportunity to be able to come back to faculty and say, I don't think I'm getting what I need. But likewise, we're using it as an assessment vehicle to not only improve the program, okay, so we highly encourage preceptors to leverage it, to use it, because in a purely retrospective basis, we'll be able to come back and say, okay, where are we weak as faculty? Where do we need to improve? And how can we make a better Army-Baylor student as we go through time? So with that, I'll open to the floor to any questions, concerns, anything you'd like to see or have explained. Happy to do it. Dan West was site visit chair for us, who is, those that don't know Dan West, is, well, he's the Accreditation Council chair. Now he's moving up to the board, right? CAMI board. He saw it, obviously likes it. I've shared it with Andy Garman, at least earlier versions of this. But we also have a paper that's forthcoming for JHAE to be able to put it out there on the street. And we kind of have shared it earlier, and that's the poster presentation. We shared it at AUPHA, when was that, 2011, 12, something like that. So it's kind of out there on the street. Fred can attest to this. We were up at a site visit in Chicago not too long ago, a program, strong program, and kind of referencing back to our conversation at breakfast, didn't have the organizational skills. They have the actual practical, their CEOs and senior level executives, but the back office type stuff to be able to frame everything and track everything was very much missing for that program. So obviously, as we go out as site visitors, share it. We don't have anything to lose.
And I think because we just went through the accreditation cycle and the visit happened, this was, I think, we were one of the only programs of accreditation that actually were claiming said that this is a strength. That criteria of competency assessment is a strength. And then we were just at the UPA conference, which is the Association for University Programs and Health Administration. That's where all these health administration programs gather, the program directors and such. And at a CAMI meeting there, where they talked about accreditation for these programs, the CAMI accreditors actually had a discussion and saying there's two areas that most of the programs in the nations are struggling with. One, believe it or not, is actually mission, vision, values in terms of making sure that those align with measurable goals for the program. You would think that MHA programs are getting that right, but that's a struggle for programs. That was the one that was identified. The second was in this competency assessment. But I wasn't in the room at the time. We do have some witnesses in the room that could testify and verify. But when they talked about competency assessment, they said there were only two nations in the country that were doing this right. It was St. Louis University and our program. And so I think word is spreading in terms of how we're doing in this. And they're also, just to let folks know, Cami just had a news release on the top graduate program in the nation they're trying to identify. Part of this is linking to competency assessment, so we're certainly going to pursue and implement an application for that. In that process, I'm sure they'll gather more data, and then the winning entries will probably be disseminated. And so we're thinking that that's another way of disseminating what we've learned.
And it continues to evolve. I mean, the faculty can attest to this. I mean, this is on version like 3.5, you know, and you know, our biggest challenge, frankly, we can evolve the product faster than we can matriculate classes. You know, so you have to start and finish with the same product. So that kind of slows us down, probably for good measure. Otherwise, we'd be making too many tweaks too fast. Sir?
Just a question, and I don't know if you've seen this or not. Fairly new out from American College of Healthcare Executives is a competency assessment for 2015 for administrators. And I was implementing this with our administrators at our medical center. And great tool. There's certainly a lot of correlation, but there's a few differences as well.
Well, right. So they use a different competency model.
Yes.
And again, nothing wrong with that, and certainly within the scope of what ACHE does. And I don't know if is it NCHL or the HLA. I can't remember which one, but HLA. So great competency assessment. A lot of work has been done by Andy Garman and many others in trying to develop both sets of those models. Nothing wrong with them at all. Our challenge, of course, is we can kind of steal some of that content, but it's not going to be a full alignment because we, right, wrong, or indifferent, we still have to maintain fidelity with the military. Even if, and there's nothing really saying or written in stone anywhere that we have to adopt and fully adhere to all aspects of the GEMC model. Okay, but we also don't have the evidentiary base yet to be able to say that this is something we should move away from, and in lack of that evidence, we need to continue to adhere.
So is this model something that we'll be able to get a hold of, not only just through the students, but be able to disseminate down and utilize, because it certainly does.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
If I can just note too, in terms of the GEMC, another strength of the GEMC is that there is an entire institute that actually manages the Joint Medical Executive Skills core curriculum. So they have their own staff, their own funding that is independent from our program. And so they actually have several online modules that you can test on the competencies that we have nothing to do with. That is kind of self-governed and self-run. We've just adopted them. And so there's a lot of value in that partnership. The other thing that we told Cami as well is great is that a challenge with some of the existing civilian competency models is the maintenance and the upkeep.
Validation.
It's because it's very volunteers have gotten together, they've developed this model, and they continue to do it. A lot of this is voluntary in terms of how they support these different models. The GEMC, again, is federally funded. And every 3 years, the Surgeons Generals actually direct senior MTF commanders to get in a room together, because we've participated every 3 years, and revalidate that model. So as industry practice changes, as there's different changes that happen, the practitioners are tweaking the model, and that's built in. And we see that as a huge benefit of adopting that model, because we don't have to do the work. There's funding, people do it, and I think that's a really good thing.
Please.
Just one other item. With the JMSC standards and so forth, as they have evolved over time, there was, when I was the regent in the program, we did integrate some of the things from the Board of Governors exam and the JMSC standards. So there are, not every single year, but there are strategic touch points where they go back and they review and they compare the JMSC standards with ACHE, Board of Governors exam, and other things like that, to kind of make sure that they're integrated. It's not a complete lockup, but there are some touch points in there, so there are some consistencies. So you will see those things that look like they're fairly similar, so because that was built into it over time.
So we're really, I echo Forrest's comments. There's a lot of strength that we can garner from just the process by which the model is developed, the GEMC model. But you have to really give a shout out to the faculty too. I mean, it's one thing to have the model, okay? It's one thing to have this product basically, but the faculty actually have to go through the process of fusing it together. How are we assessing against the model? And really, it's the fusion between the two that I think the faculty has really done an inordinate job. That's really head and shoulders above many of our peers across the entire health management landscape, and saying, okay, now we've got a model. How is it that we're going to actually assess this, and then start to drill down into the individual level of student competency achievement? That's what it's all about. And at the end of the day, we're really talking about IDPs. My mom was a teacher, and my wife's in the school system up in Schertz. We're talking about actually getting down into individual student level development, and it's should be at your core. It should be exactly what we're after. For many years, our field was very much about, well, you come in as a student, here's the curriculum, you either get it or you don't, and they come out the other end either competent or not, or competency development was very much haphazard. We're trying to minimize that variation or specify that variation by student, so that we end up with the best possible product that we can produce as a student. Any other questions, concerns? Happy to answer any questions offline as well.
And we'd like to, there's going to be opportunity when we do the panel to hear, and of course we really want to hear from you as well, but it would be great to hear some of your experiences with the bear. I mean, is it a bear? Is it really, is it problematic? Can we simplify it? Because, if you look at it, Brad, would you mind turning
Yep.
to the spreadsheet?
So on the section where actually in the residency portion, we designed this, and Brad put this together, so that each of those cells that are black right now, they're conditionally formatted. So when you put in a number for, it'll turn green or it'll turn a different color. Our hope was that as you begin building out the projects, that it was be a visual tool to see where are the gaps. And you would be able to quickly assess, okay, you've got some holes, there's some things that the projects haven't covered, the rotations haven't covered, and you would have that discussion with on a quarterly basis, on a weekly basis with your resident, saying, okay, you've got gaps here, how can we assign you a project or rotation to get you up on this area? So
We wanted to make it as user-friendly and as intuitive as possible. We've got some disagreements in the conditional formatting in the back of the room. But
I like the idea. I think another thing here would be to identify this, when you're about to send the resident out for another rotation, say, hey, during this rotation, I want you to focus on these particular issues. So let's say you're going to be sending them to the VA hospital downtown. You say, okay, while you're there, look in these particular areas and let's develop these particular competencies because we're not doing well in that particular area. So you can use it as a way to focus their attention on certain things and not just say, well, how did it go?
Right. Well, and having served as a residency chair for a few years, this didn't happen across all preceptors, but some. You got the sense that the student residency experience was very much haphazard, kind of emergent projects as they came across the DCA's or COO's desk. We very much want to start to focus on, obviously if there's something emergent, that'd be a great opportunity, by all means. But we want to make the residency process very much more purposeful, intentional, targeted, to make sure that student, because if they come in and they're weak in a particular area, and if we don't address that weakness is going to translate into incompetence somewhere in their professional life. So, if we can identify those areas of weakness, either by virtue of, their self-assessment or some objective assessment, then we have a duty in my mind to be able to target, say, when you go into that rotation, when you do that project, we need to develop X, Y, and Z. And that's really what we're after. Misha.
And I'm going to talk a little bit about this when I give my presentation on the residency, but since Brad has the pool open now, I'm just kind of going to stomp my foot on a couple of issues. Can you go to the third tab,
Yep.
Brad? Kind of scroll down a little.
You're talking this one, the residency one, or which one?
Tab number 2. Yeah, perfect.
Now, this says residency assessment. Now, during the residency, as you all know, we're trying to tie our competencies and our domains to the rotations as well as the portfolio development. So the way that we do that is through two means. There's a qualitative means and there's a quantitative means. So right here on tab 3, this is where you're capturing it quantitatively, and the students can actually assess quantitatively where they stand on each of these competencies. Now, what we want to make sure that we're doing is that we're assessing portfolio projects of this year. There will be 4, so they should be actually identifying which competencies they are touching on in their portfolio. The second piece is the rotation. So if they're going through the emergency department, or if they were doing a rotation through finance, they should be capturing those major rotations quantitatively in tab number 3. So they should be capturing 2 pieces, the portfolio as well as your major rotations. And now let's move to tab 4. And we'll probably change the name here, but it says portfolio project comments. Similarly here again, you're going to be doing 2 things here. The resident's going to be doing 2 things. Capturing qualitatively their portfolio, how they're evolving. So essentially they're 4 quarters. You should be able to look by quarter and seeing how that project is developing if you read each quarter, how they're moving through the process of project development. And again, this is a quarterly report. So even those major rotations through the emergency department, they should be qualitatively recording what they're learning and specifically focusing on what competencies they're touching on qualitatively. So on those last 2 tabs, make sure one is quantitative, one is qualitative. But more importantly, you need to be focusing on 2 pieces. They should be recording their projects, quantitative and qualitatively, as well as their major rotations. Okay? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Misha. Any other comments, questions?
Is there a rotation tool that has been developed that helps the resident go through and ask specific questions, get specific things that they need to accomplish during that rotation? It may help to drive some of the quantitative analysis on those areas.
We don't have a tool like that that I know of. There has in years past, and it may still be in the residency manual. I didn't look at this year. There was like a rotation schedule for the whole year, but nothing that gets down into the. And I don't know. I guess I'd have to think about that a little bit further. The variation or the potential variation from rotation to rotation to rotation. I don't know. There's probably we could probably come up with some kind of rubric or matrix, but it'd have to be pretty broad or loose in order to.
But that may help with the actual getting down into the details of those executive skills. And
Like how you score something a 3 versus a 6, or
exactly. Did you get those things throughout that particular rotation? It may be something that we might be able to help out with more than at this level because we're on site.
right.
But I would see that there would be, especially as you're trying to do a quantitative approach to where they think they're at by learning these things.
No, it's a great point. Great point.
Can we help to assist with that on ensuring that they get what they need as they go through that rotation?
And if you evaluate yourself a 4, what does that mean?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, what kind of value judgment are we putting with that number? No, that's a great point. Dave, you had a comment?
That's the dialogue between advisor and preceptor. If we're doing our job as advisors, we talk to you and say, looking at where they came in out of the academic, we perceive these are areas that need a plus up. That's our dialogue. Not as formal as I think you're asking for, but it's the commencement of the process.
And part of this too is a reframing for several of our students as they come through. Some will start out at the very beginning right? And they'll say, well, I'm a 9 in this area. Okay? Some will say it all the way through at the end. So the challenge that I would say put to the preceptors is like, okay, if you say you're an expert, prove it, right? Show me your expert level abilities at whatever, okay? And, you know, some of the professional development process, sometimes it needs to be humbling too, right? So if you say that you're truly an expert, produce at an expert level. This is what I expect, boom, 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 boom. You know what you would require of any sort of consultant coming in on that particular area, prove it. And if they can prove it, okay. You know, now whether that's an 8, a 9, or a 10, you know, but, you know, and again, that goes to the dialogue and what we expect out of a preceptor, frankly, is to challenge that student, not only where they're weak, but where they think that they're walking on water. Okay? Okay, I'm getting a cut signal from the back of the room, and I probably need to have a bio break anyway, so thank you for your attention, and by all means, if you have any questions, please let me know.